The way they're going on about it in the magazines, you'd think it was just invented. And not only that, but it's something terrific like a vaccine or for cancer. They put it in capital letters on the front cover. And inside they have these questionnaires like the ones they used to have about whether you were a good enough wife or an endomorph or an ectomorph. Remember that? With the scoring upside down on page 73. And then these numbered do-it-yourself dealers, rape. 10 things to do about it. Like it was 10 new hairdos or something. I mean, what's so new about it? So at work, they all have to talk about it because no matter what magazine you open, there it is, staring you right between the eyes. And they're beginning to have it on the television too. This thing's so hard to mess with. Personally, I'd prefer a June Allison movie anytime, but they don't make them anymore, and they don't even have them that much on The Late Show. For instance, day before yesterday, that would be Wednesday. Thank God it's Friday, as they say. We're sitting around in the women's lunchroom, the lunchroom. I mean, you'd think you could get some peace and quiet in there. And Chrissy closes up the magazine she's been reading and says, "How about it, girls? Did you have rape fantasies?" The four of us were having our game of bridge, the way we always do. And I had a bare 12 points, counting the singleton with not that much of a bid in anything. So I said, one club, hoping Sandra would remember about the one club convention, because the time before, when I used that, she thought I really meant clubs, and she bids us up to 3. And all I had was 4 little ones with nothing higher than a 6. And we went down 2, and on top of that, we were vulnerable. She's not in the world's best bridge player. Wait a minute. She is not the world's best bridge player. I mean, neither am I. But there's a limit. Darlene passed, but the damage was done. Sandra's head went round like it was on ball bearings, and she said, "What fantasies? What? Rape fantasies," Chrissy said. She's a receptionist, and she looks like one. She's pretty, but cool as a cucumber. Like she's been painted all over with nail polish, if you know what I mean. Varnished. It says here, all women have rape fantasies. Oh, for Christ's sake, I am eating an egg sandwich, I said. And I bid one club, and Darlene passed. "You mean like some guy jumping you in an alley or something?" Sandra said. She was eating her lunch. We all eat our lunches during the game. And she bit into a piece of that celery she always brings and started to chew on it with this thoughtful expression in her eye. And I knew we might as well pack it in as far as the game was concerned. "Yeah, sort of like that," Chrissy said. She was blushing a little. You could see it even under her makeup. "Well, I don't think you should go out alone at night," Darlene said. "You put yourself in a position." And I may have been mistaken, but she was looking at me. She's the oldest. She's 41. Now, you wouldn't know it, and neither does she. But I looked it up in the employee's file. I like to guess a person's age and then look it up, see if I'm right. I let myself have an extra pack of cigarettes if I am. Though I am trying to cut down. I figure it's harmless as long as you don't tell. I'll never tell. I mean, not everyone has access to that file. It's more or less confidential. But it's all right if I tell you. I don't expect you'll ever meet her, though you never know. It's a small world. Anyway. For heaven's sake, it's only Toronto, Greta said. She worked in Detroit for 3 years, and she never lets you forget it. It's like she's a war hero or something. We should all admire her just for the fact that she's still walking this earth. Though she was really living in Windsor the whole time. She just worked in Detroit, which for me doesn't really count. It's where you sleep, right? It's where you sleep. Well, do you? Chrissy said. She was obviously trying to tell us about hers, but she wasn't about to go first. She's cautious, that one. I certainly don't, Darlene said, and wrinkled up her nose like this. And I had to laugh. I think it's disgusting. She's divorced. I read that in the file, too. And she never talks about it. It must have been years ago anyway. She got up and went over to the coffee machine and turned her back on us, though she wasn't going to have anything more to do with it, as though. Huh. Well, Greta said, I could see it was going to be between her and Chrissy. They're both blondes. I don't mean that in a bitchy way, but they try to outdress each other. Greta would like to get out of filing. She'd like to be a receptionist too, so she can meet more people. You don't meet much of anyone in filing, except other people in filing. Now me, I don't mind it so much. I have outside interests. I have outside interests. Well, Greta said, I sometimes think about, my apartment. It's got this little balcony. I like to sit out there in the summer and have a few plants out there. I never bother that much about locking the door to the balcony. It's one of those sliding glass ones. I'm on the 18th floor, for heaven's sake. I've got a good view of the lake and the CN Tower and all. But I'm sitting round one night in my housecoat watching TV with my shoes off. You know how you do. And I see this guy's feet coming down past the window. Next thing you know, he's standing on the balcony. He's let himself down by a rope with a hook on the end of it from the floor above. That's the 19th. And before I can even get up off the Chesterfield, he's inside the apartment. He's all dressed in black with black gloves on. I knew right away what show she got the black gloves off, because I saw that same one. And then he, you know what, Chrissy said, but Greta said. And afterwards he tells me that he goes all over the outside of the apartment building like that, from one floor to another, with his rope and his hook. Then he goes out to the balcony, tosses his rope, and he climbs up it and disappears. Just like Tarzan, I said, but nobody laughed. Is that all? Chrissy said. Don't you ever think about, I think about being in a bathtub with no clothes on. So, who takes a bath in their clothes? I said. You have to admit it's stupid when you come to think of it. Bet you just went on. Lots of bubbles, and what I use is Vita Bath. It's more expensive, but it's relaxing. My hair pinned up, and the door opens, and this fellow's standing there. How to get in? Greta said. Oh, I don't know. Through a window or something. Well, I can't very well get out of the bathtub. The bathtub's too small. And besides, he's blocking the doorway, so I just lie there. And he starts to very slowly take his own clothes off. And then he gets into the bathtub with me. Well, don't you scream or anything? Said Darlene. She'd come back with her cup of coffee. She was getting really interested. I'd scream like bloody murder. Who'd hear me? Chrissy said. Besides, all the articles say it's better not to resist that way. You don't get hurt. Anyway, you might get bubbles up your nose, I said, from the deep breathing. And I swear that all four of them looked at me like I was in bad taste, like I'd insulted the Virgin Mary or something. I mean, you don't see what's wrong with a little joke now and then. Life's too short, right? Listen, I said, those aren't rape fantasies. I mean, you aren't getting raped. Define your meaning of rape. I think a rape is when you're not wanting it at all. You didn't request it and you didn't consent to it, but it's happening anyway. Some little weasel taking over. It's just some guy you haven't met formally who happens to be more attractive than Derek Cummings. He's the assistant manager. He wears elevator shoes, or at any rate, they have these thick soles, and has this funny way of talking. We call him Derek Duck. And you have a good time. Rape is when they've got a knife or something and you don't want to. So what about you, Estelle? Chrissy said. She was miffed because I laughed at her fantasy. She thought I was putting her down. And Sandra was miffed too. By this time she'd finished her celery. She wanted to tell about hers, but she hadn't gotten in fast enough. All right, let me tell you one, I said. I'm walking down this dark street at night, and this fellow comes up and grabs my arm. Now it so happens that I have a plastic lemon in my purse. You know how it always says you should carry a plastic lemon in your purse. Well, I don't really do it. I tried it once, but the darn thing leaked all over my checkbook. But in this fantasy, I have one. And I say to him, you're intending to rape me, right? And he nods. So I open my purse to get the plastic lemon, and I can't find it. My purse is full of all this junk. Kleenex and cigarettes and my change purse and my lipstick and my driver's license. You know, the kind of stuff. So I ask him to hold out his hands, you know, like this. And I just pile all this junk into them. Down at the bottom, there's the plastic lemon. And I can't get the top off. So I hand it to him. And he's very obliging. He twists the top off and he hands it back to me. And I squirt him in the eye. Well, I hope you don't think that's too vicious. Come to think of it, it's a bit mean, especially when he was so polite and all. That's your rape fantasy? Chrissy says. I don't believe it. She's a card, Darlene says. She and I are the ones who've been here the longest. And she will never forget the time I got drunk at the office party and insisted I was going to dance under the table instead of on top of it. I did a sort of Cossack number. But then I hit my head at the bottom of the table. Actually, it was a desk. And I took it up and knocked myself out cold. She's decided that the mark of an original mind, that's their mark. And she tells everyone she knew about it. And she told everyone knew about it. And I'm not sure that's fair. Though I did do it. I'm being totally honest, I say. I always am, and they know it. There's no point in being anything else. It's the way I look at it. And sooner or later, the truth will out. So you might as well not waste the time, right? You should hear the one about the easy off cleaner. But that was the end of the lunch hour with one bridge game shot to hell. And the next day we spent most of the time arguing over whether to start a new game or play out the hands we had left over from the day before. So Sandra never did get a chance to tell about her rape fantasy. It started me thinking, though, about my own rape fantasies. Maybe I'm abnormal or something. I mean, I have fantasies about handsome strangers coming in through the windows too, like Mr. Clean. I wish one would. Please, God, somebody without flat feet and big sweat marks on his shirt and over 5'5". Believe me, being tall is a handicap, though it's getting better. Tall guys are starting to like someone whose nose reaches higher than their belly button. But if you're being totally honest, you can't reach those. You can't count those as rape fantasies. In a real rape fantasy, what you should feel is this anxiety. Like when you think about your apartment building catching on fire, or whether you should use the elevator or on the stairs, and maybe just stick your head under a wet towel, and you try to remember everything you've read about what to do, but you can't decide. For instance, I'm walking along this dark street at night, and this short, ugly fellow comes up and grabs my arm. And not only is he ugly, a sort of puffy, nothing face, like those fellows you have to talk to in the bank when your account's overdrawn. Of course, I don't mean they're all like that, but he's absolutely covered in pimples. So it gets me pinned against the wall. And he's short, but he's heavy. And he starts to undo himself. And the zipper gets stuck. I mean, one of the most significant moments in a girl's life. It's almost like getting married or having a baby. And he sticks the zipper. So I say, kind of disgusted, "Oh, for Christ's sake." He starts to cry. He tells me he's never been able to get anything right in his entire life. And this is the last straw. He's going to jump off a bridge. Look, I say, I feel so sorry for him. In my rape fantasies, I always end up feeling sorry for the guy. I mean, there's be something wrong with them. If it was Clint Eastwood, it'd be different, but worse luck, it never is. I was the kind of little girl who buried dead robins, you know what I mean? It used to drive my mother nuts. She didn't like me touching them because of the germs, I guess. So I say, "Listen, I know how you feel. You really should do something about those pimples. If you got rid of them, you'd be quite good looking, honest. Then you wouldn't have to go around doing stuff like this. I had them myself once," I say to comfort him. But in fact, I did. And it ends up, I give him the name of my old dermatologist, the one I had in high school. That was back in Leamington. Except I used to go to St. Catherine's for the dermatologist. I'm telling you, I was really lonely when I first came here. I thought it was going to be such a big adventure and all, but it's a lot harder to meet people in a city. But I guess it's different for a guy. Or I'm lying in bed with this terrible cold, my face is all swollen up, my eyes are red, and my nose is dripping like a leaky tap. And this fellow comes in through the window, and he has a terrible cold too. It's a new kind of flu that's been going around. So he says, "I'm going to rape you." I hope you don't mind me holding my nose like this, but that's the way I imagine. He lets out this terrible sneeze, which slows him down a bit. Also, I'm no object of beauty myself. You'd have to be some kind of pervert to want to rape someone with a cold like mine. It'd be like raping a bottle of Lepagin's musculages the way my nose is running. Lepage musculage. I don't know what that means, but she does. He's looking around wildly around the room, and I realize it's because he doesn't have a piece of Kleenex. "It's right here," I say, and I pass him the Kleenex. God knows why he's even bothered to get out of bed. You'd think if you were going to go around climbing in windows, you'd wait till you were healthier, right? I mean, that takes a certain amount of energy. So I ask him, why doesn't he let me fix him a Neo-Catran and scotch? That's what I always take. You still have the cold, but you don't feel it. So I do, and we end up watching The Late Show together. I mean, they aren't all sex maniacs. The rest of the time, they must lead a normal life. I figure they enjoy watching The Late Show just like anybody else. Sure. Jesus, how long is this story? I do have a scarier one, though, where the fellow says he's hearing angel voices that are telling him he's got to kill me, you know. I read about things like that all the time in the papers. In this one, I'm not in the apartment where I live now. I'm back at my mother's house in Leamington. And the fellow's been hiding in the cellar. He grabs my arm when I go downstairs to get a jar of jam. He's got hold of the axe, too, out of the garage, the one that's really scary. I mean, what do you say to a nut like that? So I start to shake, but after a minute, I get control of myself, and I say, is he sure the angel voices have got the right person? Because I hear the same angel voices they've been telling me for some time that I'm going to give birth to the reincarnation of Saint Anne, who in turn has the Virgin Mary. And right after that comes Jesus Christ and the end of the world. And he wouldn't want to interfere with that, would he? So he gets confused. And he listens some more, and then he asks for a sign. And I show him my vaccination mark. You can see it's sort of an odd-shaped one. It got infected because I scratched the top off, and that does it. He apologizes, climbs out the coal chute again, which is how he got in the first place. And I say to myself, there's some advantage in having been brought up a Catholic, even though I haven't been to church since they changed the service into English. Just as it's the same, you might as well be a Protestant. I must write to Mother and tell her to nail up that coal chute. It has always bothered me. Funny, I couldn't tell you at all what this man looks like. But I know exactly what kind of shoes he's wearing because that's the last I see him. His shoes going up the coal chute. And they're the old-fashioned kind that lace up the ankles, even though he's a young fellow. That's strange, isn't it? Let me tell you, though, I really sweat until I see him safely out of there, and I go upstairs right away and make myself a cup of tea. I don't think about that one much. My mother always said you shouldn't dwell on unpleasant things, and I generally agree with that. I mean, dwelling on them doesn't make them go away, though not dwelling on them doesn't make them go away either, when you come to think of it. Sometimes I have these short ones where the fellow grabs my arm, but I'm really a kung fu expert. Can you believe it? In real life, I'm sure I would just be a conk on the head, and that's that. Like getting your tonsils out, you'd wake up, it'll be all over, except for the sore places. And you'd be lucky if your neck wasn't broken or something. I could never even hit the volleyball in gym, and a volleyball is fairly large, you know. And I just go zap with my fingers into his eyes. That's it. He falls over. Or I flip him up against a wall or something, but I could never really stick my fingers in anyone's eyes. Could you? It would feel like hot Jello. And I don't even like cold Jello. Just thinking about it gives me the creeps. Yeah, ugh. The creeps. I feel a bit guilty about that one. I mean, how would you like walking around knowing someone's been blinded for life because of you? Yeah, you probably wouldn't forget that one, would you? Maybe it's different for a guy. The most touching one I have is when the fellow grabs my arms and I say sad, sort of dignified. You'd be raping a corpse. That pulls him up short. And I explained that I just found out I have leukemia, and the doctors have only given me a few months to live. That's why I'm out pacing the streets alone at night. I need to think, come to terms with myself. I don't really have leukemia, but in the fantasy, I do. I guess I chose that particular disease because a girl in my grade 4 class died of it. The whole class sent her flowers when she was in the hospital. I didn't understand then that she was going to die. And I wanted to have leukemia too so I could get flowers. Kids are funny, aren't they? Well, it turns out that he has leukemia himself. And he only has a few months to live. And that's why he's going around raping people. He's very bitter because he's so young. His life is being taken from him before he's really lived it. So we walk along gently under the streetlights. It's spring and sort of misty, and we end up going for coffee. We're happy we found the only other person in the world who could understand what we're going through. It's almost like fate. And after a while, we just sort of look at each other, and our hands touch. And he comes back with me and moves into my apartment, and we spend our last months together before we die. We just sort of don't wake up in the morning, though. I've never decided which one of us gets to die first. If it's him, I have to go on and fantasize about the funeral. If it's me, I don't have to worry about that. So it just about depends on how tired I am at the time. Now, you may not believe this, but sometimes I even start to cry. I cry at the end of movies, even the ones that aren't all that sad, so I guess it's the same thing. My mother's like that too. The funny thing about these fantasies is that the man is always someone I don't know. And the statistics in the magazines, well, most of them anyway, they say it's someone you do know, at least a little bit, like your boss or something. I mean, it wouldn't be my boss. He's over 60. I'm sure he couldn't rape his way out of a paper bag, poor old thing. But it might be someone like Derek Duck in his elevator shoes, perish thought. Or someone you just met who invites you up for a drink. It's getting so you can hardly be sociable anymore. And how are you supposed to meet people if you can't trust them even that basic amount? You can't spend your whole life in the filing department or cooped up in your own apartment with all the doors and windows locked and the shades down. Now, I'm not what you would call a drinker, but I like to go out now and then for a drink or two in a nice place, even if I am by myself. Now, I'm with women's lib on that one, though I can't agree with a lot of the other things they say. Like here, for instance, the waiters all know me, and if anyone, bothers me, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, except I think it helps you to get to know a person, especially at first, hearing some of the things they think about. At work, they call me the office worrywart. But it isn't so much like worrying. It's more like figuring out what you should do in an emergency, like I said before. Anyway, another thing about it is that there's a lot of conversation. In fact, I spend most of my time in the fantasy, that is, wondering what I'm going to say and what he's going to say. I think it would be better if you could get a conversation going. Like, how can a fellow do that to a person he's just had a long conversation with? Once you get to know, once you let them know you're human, you have a life too. I don't see how they could go ahead with it, right? I mean, I know it happens, but I just don't understand it. That's the part I really don't understand. Well, see, it's because men can be evil. Really evil. Oh, that was the end